Okay. We're here at Jazz Live San Diego with Kevin Mahogany. Kevin, thanks for being with us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me down. I appreciate it.
So last time I think we saw you at least at a Jazz 88 function was for the Jazz 88 Jazz Festival.
Right.
And
at the beach there.
Yeah, and did you enjoy that experience here?
Oh, yeah, we had a great time. You know, it was a good turnout, a lot of people, great music, including us. So yeah, we did. We had a good time.
Excellent. Well, you're playing tonight with one of San Diego's best, Mike Wofford. You familiar with Mike and and his music? Can you tell us a little bit about how familiar you are with him?
Well, I met Mike through his wife, through Holly, and that's how I got to know him and got to know his music. And then, but once you learn about Mike, actually not only hear him play, but look into his past, the people he's played with is a literal who's who of musicians. So you can't ask to be in any better hands.
Well, and then tonight's show, you're going to be featuring some of the music of Johnny Hartman, correct?
We got a little Johnny Hartman for you. Yes, we do.
Excellent. Well, I was reading a little bit about Johnny Hartman, and you have quite a history of doing the music and advocating for the music of Johnny Hartman. How did you get introduced to his music?
Well, you know, I got introduced to it like most people I think do, was through the Hartman Coltrane CD. And that, I remember bringing that home and putting it on and listening to it. And then whenever I started coming home, I'd find my wife would be listening to it. She was so relaxing and so mellow. But to me, Johnny Hartman is the definitive ballad singer, I mean, of all time. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would say there are others, but to me, it's Johnny Hartman. And that's what gravitated me more towards finding out about him and about his music. And as I did that, not only did I find out he was considered a singer's singer. In other words, he was the one other singers would come out to see and come out to hear and get material from and borrow from. You know, just his style and relaxed style and way of singing was what drew me to him, and I've been kind of checking him out ever since then.
And his low and full voice definitely kind of reminds me of your voice. You see those kind of comparisons too?
Thank you. I hear those comparisons. I don't try and compare myself to anyone, only because, you know, I mean, that's not the way I look at it. If someone compares me to someone they like, then I'm okay. I mean, that's important. But the comparisons to like a Johnny Hartman or a Joe Williams or something, I'll take them. I'll accept them, yes.
Well, and Hartman, I found it very interesting in his career that he was playing with Dizzy and playing some of the bebop stuff, and then kind of found his own way into more pop music, and was a balladeer and more crossing over into popular music too. But that when he recorded the Hartman Coltrane disc, that brought him back over into jazz. But it's in some ways he felt like it kind of made him pigeonholed into the jazz thing and not as a kind of a crossover.
Well, I think sometimes you have to look into what was considered jazz at the time in pop music. And the pop really for him was a little later. He was really doing like everyone else, the standards of the time. When you look at most of the male singers in jazz, a lot of the ones who were very popular weren't considered jazz singers. When you talk about an Arthur Prysock or Billy Eckstine, they don't consider them jazz singers. They think they were pop singers. But again, you start getting into that gray area of the difference between pop music and jazz music. And so that's why I think got Johnny caught up in there also. And
then I had read an interesting thing that race played a part in him, and that he was so good that white people were gravitated toward him, but that created some sort of a backlash too. That someone who sang so sweet, it kind of made people envious. White people, especially probably white males, envious.
Well, I don't know. I hadn't heard that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying it's not true. I hadn't heard that. But from what I understood was that part of why he got his record deal was because they were looking for a black artist who could cross over like Bing Crosby, or it sounded like Bing. And if you listen to them, there are some similarities in their style. And but they wanted a black artist who could sing like Bing, but play to a black audience. And I that's what I read.
Right.
Now, that's not. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But I think he had the kind of voice that anybody would love to hear. I mean, that, like I said, when I found out and started learning more about him, unfortunately, I didn't learn about him until after he had passed.
Right.
So I never got the chance to see him live. But I've been fortunate enough in the years that I've been touring to work with different artists who've worked with him, and they'll tell me stories about him. And I've had the good fortune of meeting his widow and his daughter, one of his daughters, and who've talked to me about him and have come to see me do his show a few times.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your music history. How are from what I read, music was a big part of your life growing up from the very beginning.
Yes, it was. That was part of one of the staples of our household was music, as well as going to school. The arts was a part of it, and a lot of people, I think, miss out on that nowadays. They don't stress the arts as much, but it was important as in our house as English and math was.
And
so we all started out playing instruments. We all started on piano, and to get us to go, my mother not only took us, but she took piano lessons with us. And she said, well, if you stay on the piano for at least a year, then you can switch to any instrument you want. And so I switched to clarinet a little later on. My brothers switched to trumpet. My sisters switched to violin. Then I continued on. I'm the only one who's still involved in music as a profession. And I switched to saxophone. Actually, I didn't switch to it. I added it. And I started playing professionally when I turned 12 back in Kansas City. So they saw that kind of early. I kind of knew early on that this was something I was going to be doing.
And that was interesting that I read that you played baritone saxophone.
Right.
And I wondered if, and I'm sure at that time your voice wasn't as low and full as it is now. But I'm wondering, do you see any relationship between your voice and how it's evolved and your playing of the baritone saxophone?
Well, not necessarily just playing bari, but playing an instrument. Period. Because like I said, my voice wasn't. Trust me. I got rejected a lot of times because I sounded like a little girl when I was young, like most of us do before our voice changes. And then my voice started getting lower after high school, really. In college, I started, it's still going down, of course. But the saxophone, well, part of it was because I was playing saxophone before I started focusing on singing. So my focus was a little different. At that time, I was playing in a big band back in Kansas City. And just the education that I got from working and playing in the big band and playing in that kind of ensemble carried over and crossed over into what I'm doing now as a vocalist, as far as performance aspects and the way you rehearse and the working with musicians or working with the other instrumentalists. So I gained a lot from my instrumental background, even though I haven't touched the horn in quite a few years now, but it definitely was a big plus as far as how I sing and the way I even scat, when I improvise now.
And you were doing R&B work too, and those kind of bands too. When you were growing up, how did you make the switch to kind of focus on jazz? What kind of pushed you in that vein?
That is a good question. I'm not sure. I mean, I've been able to sing everything, and I really consider myself a vocalist, which means I can do about anything. I don't mind. I like singing all kinds of styles.